What's going on, everyone, and welcome back to the View from the Clipper podcast. I'm your host, James Warner, as always, joined by my co-host, Josh Sexton. Josh, how are you doing this afternoon?
Good, James. I've woken up with that sort of feeling of a big game on the horizon tonight. It's weird as a Clippers fan because I think we've had so many big games over the course of like the past few years, especially throughout the 2-1-3 era. I used to always like go to bed the night before being like, oh God, like this is like, this is the one, especially in playoff games. I remember that the game was 6 when Terrence Mann scored 40 against the Utah Jazz, kind of going to bed and being like,
Yes.
oh God, like this is just a huge game tonight. Like I need the Clippers to do something. And then you wake up in the morning full of excitement. But that's actually like hit me the morning before this time instead. Because I'll probably only be watching the game tomorrow morning. Don't think I'm gonna stay up for it.
Yep.
So yeah, like 24 hours worth of excitement now to get through in the hope that the Clippers can get something done tonight. How are you feeling about it all?
Yeah, I think nervy as well. Like you go through what has been a grueling season for the Clippers, a bit of a roller coaster season. The Clippers have really obviously turned it on since the turn of the year, really, and it's just all come down to this one game against the Portland Trail Blazers where winning it will. And I think we had a bit of a lengthy chat before we come on of trying to figure out what it entirely means, but pretty much the Clippers win tonight against Portland Trail Blazers, they will clinch the eighth seed, which is just absolutely huge for the Clippers considering where they started the season. And just getting that chance to play in the play-in against the Phoenix Suns, and then an opportunity to get into the playoffs would just be phenomenal for this group, for the fans, for everyone. So yeah, I've got those sort of nervous butterflies thinking about the game later, and it's difficult when you are as we are based in the UK, and the fact that yeah, this probably is not going to be one I'm going to be able to tune into, and it's going to be an awkward watch tomorrow morning. That's for sure. But a little bit excited for it, but definitely nervous, and more nervous because of the last game we played against the Portland Trail Blazers, which was obviously a really tough loss, probably one of the worst losses of the season in terms of like performance, particularly in the part of the season where the Clippers have been better. I'm completely discounting that early run, that 6-21, because obviously the Clippers were terrible during that period. But also some of the things that we've seen over the last week since we've recorded, and I'm keen to probably start there, Josh, because I don't really want to go into games in too much detail, but it'd be good to just run through some of them and like some of the themes and highlights from the games and what this week is going to sort of tell us about how the Clippers might perform tonight. And obviously that did start, and I think it's where we left off last week with the game against the San Antonio Spurs, which was unfortunately a 102-115 loss to the Spurs, a Wemby-less Spurs as well, which I didn't expect. And sorry, just a quick correction. It was 118-99 Clippers in this game. When I saw that Wemby was out at the start of this one, I was like, interesting. Like I had been saying for a little while, I think the Clippers have played decently well against the Spurs. This having their own injury problems and having their star guys in and out of the lineup, but I thought this was one that the Clippers may have done some kind of damage in, but in the end, Spurs really just had way too much for the Clippers in this game. We then had sort of two, I think we sort of said last week, two decently routine wins. Obviously, we had seen the Clippers throw a horrible game away to the Kings previously, but they ended up taking that one, which again we fully expected, a 138-109 win against the Kings, followed up by a 116-103 win against the Dallas Mavericks, which was the first night back to back before playing the Oklahoma City Thunder at Intuit Dome without Darius Garland, which was a 128-110 loss. Want to get your thoughts on the last week of Clippers basketball, Josh, and like what has stuck out the most. As I said, not too interested in like analysing the performances in each of the individual games because, as I said, I think we kind of expected this like 2-2 scenario. It was extremely realistic. Like we're playing the first and second seed in the West, and we wasn't sure who was going to be around. As I said, against the Thunder, Clippers didn't even have Darius Garland. So, what stuck out to you the most over the last week over these games?
Yeah, I guess there's a few kind of like rotational themes, and we can kind of take them down one by one, can't we? Because one of the things we've spoke about a lot this season, particularly since the trades, really is that the rotation doesn't seem to be like quite perfect. The Clippers in fact, probably from the trades is maybe harsh. From the moment that Yannick goes down, I think that's when the rotations start to become a little bit less than ideal, and it's only added to by Isaiah Jackson then going down with an injury too,
Yep.
because a lot of it is just kind of getting size in that second unit. Nicholas Batum, unfortunately, just looks like a player who has lost a step, and so he couldn't necessarily be that guy to be in that unit. I know he brings like relative size at like what would he be like 6'8", 6'9" maybe. But me and you've been kind of lobbying for Kobe Sanders to come into the rotation over him, and then that left a hole in terms of that backup center position. It's one that I don't think Nicholas Batum could fill anymore. And the Clippers have done something clever, like I'd been talking about, and maybe sort of missing the ball slightly, or maybe not thinking about the overall impact on the team. But I've been talking about moving John Collins to the five as the starting five, because he's the third best player on the team when everybody is healthy. So he is one of those guys that you want to be out there. I imagine even still, now that he's coming off the bench, he's in closing lineups and stuff. But as I mentioned there, he is now coming off the bench, so that's how the Clippers are kind of combating that lack of size off the bench. There's still some wrinkles to shake out within that. Like Benedict Mathurin has not been perfect at all really since John Collins
No.
dropped to the bench, so the Clippers are going to need more from him. But if we're kind of taking these things one by one, and like starting with Kobe Sanders coming in over Nicholas Batum, really pleased for Kobe, because you've kind of seen that every time this season he's been given a vote of confidence by Tyler Lue, by the Clippers staff, he's really stood up to the plate, and this week has been no different. Like, you look at the stat lines that Kobe's been able to put up over the last week, and I saw a stat from the other day as well that I think it's since the turn of the year, maybe. I should have really got the stat up to confirm this, but he's got like one of the best shooting percentages from 3 point in the NBA. So that's the level of shooter that you're dealing with. Like, the eye test tells you how good his shots are as well. He's got a really clean stroke, and I do think that matters, because I've spoken before about how I think Jordan Miller's stroke is a little bit slow. Benedict Mathurin's 3 point shot has been maybe non-existent is overdoing it, but at least very wayward, quite similar to Jordan Miller really, in terms of like, I think both of those guys are scorers from within the elbow. They're not necessarily 3 point shooters. So Kobe Sanders has been a godsend in that sense, and it just feels like it's a sort of more well-rounded bench unit now when you do add Collins into that. And I do want to sort of come on to talk about that when you come back to me, because I've got a sort of few more thoughts around that are separate to Kobe.
Yeah.
But I just think he's now benefiting from being a part of that bench unit, having that vote of confidence. The Clippers are benefiting from his 3 point shooting. And again, like, Nicholas Batum has been a great servant to the Clippers. There's absolutely no disputing that. I even think like the contributions he's given this season will maybe go a little bit underrated, because there's just been like bigger and sort of broader storylines. And I mean that in terms of like sample size of storylines. But to have a guy who is like, going on 40, or is he 40 now? Still playing like pretty meaningful basketball at crucial times of the season for the Clippers, I don't think that should be understated. And the attitude and the leadership and all those things should never be understated with Nico, because that's always been there from the moment that he came in to the Clippers organization. So if these are the last kind of like throws of Nicholas Batum's Clippers career, then like it's been an absolute pleasure to watch him play basketball. Just because that isn't the case anymore, it doesn't mean that he's not been like a pleasure to have around the place and to be on the team. So like, assuming these are the last kind of minutes and throws of that career, then like, you can only wish him the best really. But I'm sure Nico wouldn't have it any other way than like for him to step aside and let a young guy come in to take his place, and like someone that he can nurture in the way that he's nurtured guys like Wemby and young French guys in the league in general. I'm sure he'll love to kind of like really pass that baton onto Kobe Sanders, and then step sort of into the background in whatever guys that comes for Nico. He'll go with our best wishes, won't he?
I was going to say the exact same thing in terms of like the passing of the baton, because it kind of feels like that moment, and I don't think I've really given it that kind of reflection until you've brought it up now on the pod, to be honest. But it definitely feels like it's starting to trend that way. I think we'd recently mentioned how we wanted more minutes for Kobe Sanders. I think he deserved it, and he deserved it over Nicholas Batum. And obviously, since seeing him play and his production, his reliability, even with Nico's experience, I just can't see him working his way back into the rotation at such like a high pressured part of the season. But he's a seasoned vet. He's someone that if injuries or for any reason they need him, they can fall back on him. He's not a player who can't contribute at all. It's just that we just haven't had that same output, and I think his career has obviously just been trending that way, particularly over the last few years. I think it's probably been maybe last season was probably when we saw the last of like the real Nico Batum that we've known and loved for Clippers, and that's just the point that he's gotten to in his career, and obviously just salute to him and the mark he's made in LA. Obviously, he's such a fan favorite. He's obviously gone through it in his career in terms of even just in his sort of Clippers tenure in terms of being traded to Philly, and he just the short time he had in Philly, obviously the Philly fans quickly found out about Nico Batum. I think will go down as like one of the most underrated players that most people who are not Clippers or Philly fans will remember as being the guy who got the massive paycheck from Charlotte and never delivered. But this is a guy who will go down, in my opinion, as like one of the better role players that I've seen the Clippers have, but also in the NBA in general. So salute to Nico. I definitely want him to rub off some of that shot making magic that he has and his sort of quick release on Kobe Sanders, because that if Kobe Sanders can pick up that part of Nico's game, and also just in terms of being a bit of I think he's been coined many times as being like a bit of a Swiss Army knife, right? So I see that for Kobe Sanders. I see that in his like future NBA career as like a guy who can do it all. Probably not in the same way in terms of like his length and ability to play small ball. I don't think that's part of could be part of his game, but probably in more of a guard format. I can see him being just a well-rounded player who can just slot into any team and be effective. So yeah, great to see Kobe back in the lineup. I yeah, liked your points around Benedict Mathurin, because over these games and even back in the last game against Portland, which we'll obviously preview in a little bit, he's obviously been on a little bit of a downtrend. He started super hot with the Clippers, right? He had a few of those really fantastic performances against teams like the Toronto Raptors, Chicago Bulls, Milwaukee Bucks. He was on a tear in terms of putting up 20 plus points. Even had that big game against the Nuggets where he scored 38 points. Like, he'd started life in a Clipper uniform in such a perfect way. And although the shot making wasn't there in terms of his outside shooting, even like his sort of mid-range shot, not always consistent for him. We knew that when he came in from the Pacers. But just like his aggression in terms of getting to the line and just like not giving up, I think that aggression has been there, but maybe not to like the same level. And the shot making, whilst like I said, it's been inconsistent, sort of the volumes of shots that he's taken has really taken a downturn. I think he's averaged about 9 points over those last 5 games. He's also, I think, only taken was it 7 threes over those 5 games, which is just it's far too low. And again, I know he's not the most reliable 3-point scorer, but the Clippers need him to be taking shots. They need him to be aggressive. Even in the interior, he's really not taking as many shots. He seems far more confident going to the rim, but even then, like I've definitely seen like a downturn in the number of shots that he's taking, and the Clippers need him to be more aggressive. They need that production by any way he can put the ball in the basket, right? And that traditionally has been at the line. I was obviously it was a win over Sacramento, but I was probably a little disappointed that he didn't even go to the line once in that game, and didn't even go to the line once against Portland. We can't see that tonight. Like that can't happen at all. He needs to be aggressive, particularly with Portland and the rate in which they give turnovers. I think they give the most turnovers in the league. He needs to be active. So I've been pretty disappointed with Benedict Mathurin, particularly over the last 5 games, and I hope that we see a turnaround. It would be pretty remarkable for that to be turned around in just one game. But obviously, this is a big moment now. Maybe those last 5 games didn't feel as big, and he's still getting acclimatized to a new team. I think it was just disappointing that, like I said, he started so hot, and now we are sort of seeing the tail end of that. But yeah, I think Clippers definitely need a big game from Benedict Mathurin tonight. I know you wanted to talk a little bit about John Collins as well, and the fact that he's obviously taken a step back to the bench, which could potentially solve some of their size issues that they've had, and definitely had in that Portland game.
Yes, like just on the Benedict Mathurin point first and foremost, like I think you're so right about the aggression and like that's generally like the call to arms we're doing for the Clippers in general coming up against the Portland Trailblazers. Like we want to see a more aggressive thing. I saw Jamal Christopher on Twitter putting a tweet out the other night, sort of saying like this is not really about X and O's, it's about like working hard, out rebounding them.
Yeah.
Kawhi mentioned rebounding as well, albeit Kawhi was kind of like playing down this as like an occasion. Kawhi will have a better sense of the guys than I do. I would be kind of like tempted for the guys to lean into it being an occasion, but if he thinks that might like kind of get in heads a little bit, especially with a couple of younger guys on the team now, then he's more than right to focus on things like rebounding, on things like energy, on things like athleticism, and that's where like Benedict Mathurin has all of those things, not necessarily the rebounding, although his rebounding this week has been like quite good. Strangely, like he was 6 boards against the Mavs, 6 boards against Sacramento, even 7 against San Antonio, which is like kind of crazy when you look across that as a bunch of stats. Um, it's clearly something that he can bring. We've definitely seen him start to like try and introduce a bit of playmaking to his game as well. And I wonder if like part of the Benedict Mathurin experience and where like Indiana fans were getting particularly frustrated with him is that he can kind of be a bit like tunnel visioned at points. Like it is that very much like get to the line or die trying. But if he
Yeah.
doesn't get to the line, then like there's just a lot of like really clumsy turnovers. There's a lot of just like even like they're not necessarily snatch blocks, but like the kind of blocks where like he runs in on a big guy and the big guy just kind of goes like no and either like puts it out for an inbound for either the Clippers or for their team if Mathurin kind of falls into it, or just completely comes away with the ball in general and it ends up being one of those kind of like awful turnovers that I was talking about. So like part of maybe him being tunnel visioned is that if the Clippers coaching staff are trying to get a bit of playmaking and assist into his game, maybe he's kind of having to go like, okay, I'll do the assist bit and then I'll come back to the scoring bit and see if I can kind of add the assist bit into that rather than like being able to still do the scoring and bring the assists in. Maybe it's just that his mind is not quite built as a basketball player or developed as a basketball player yet, to the point where it can be like I can just add this string, like thread the string into my bow and then we can go from there. It's more of like I have to physically focus on the fact that I'm doing this and focus on nothing else, and then I can kind of blend it all together after that. But the John Collins thing to me like kind of seems like a no-brainer, and that's why I mentioned before that I was almost like not frustrated with myself because that would be overselling it really. But when I was saying about like maybe moving him to starting center, this just makes loads of sense. Yes, like he is the third best player on the team, and I know I heard the Lob the Jam guys talking about that as well, and I think it was Lucas Hahn in particular saying like the trouble is he's the third best player, so like you need him to be starting, and I don't necessarily agree with that, and I think like a lot of NBA conversations these days are a bit too fixed around the starters. Like closing lineups matter more than starting lineups is the thing that I
Yeah.
like always go back to. And I would presume still that John Collins will still be in closing lineups for the Clippers. So even if he's not starting, it'll be like heavy bench minutes. He effectively goes into the sixth man, and maybe that's when Benedict Mathurin has like been struggling a little bit, albeit the minutes against Sacramento are still in Benedict Mathurin's favour. And they just about weren't by like 50 seconds against the Dallas Mavericks. Then obviously Collins came back into the starting lineup for Garland against OKC, but
Mhm.
maybe that's where Benedict Mathurin is just still kind of figuring out things a bit. But like he needs to figure that out like tonight. Really, so like I heard on I think it was I think it might have still been the Lob the Jam actually about like the Clippers runway as like ran out like tonight is the runway. Well, tonight is the moment you have to take off. The runway is the runway is done. So Benedict Mathurin doesn't have more time to practice alongside John Collins on the bench. Like that just has to click into place tonight now. And both of them, by sheer force of will, have to make it click into place. And Collins has looked good off the bench. He's looked like he can still get his own off the bench. 7 rebounds against Dallas there, even though it like probably wasn't his best shooting night on the whole, with 1 from 5 from three. So like those guys need to be able to make it happen in tandem together. And I think a big part of that is Benedict Mathurin kind of leaning into this like playmaker thing a little bit, where if
Yeah.
if as he's driving into the paint, Collins is sort of like almost cutting in or creeping into the dunker spot, like being more wary of that on the court, like having a bit more court vision to be like, okay, if it's a really big guy I'm up against, so like Donovan Clingan, if it's Donovan Clingan that I'm up against as I'm coming in, or if Tumani Kamara is like snatching into the lane as I'm driving, like I know where John Collins is at all times, so he's the one that I dump the ball to, and then like you can trust Collins around the rim at all times. I think rather than just being like, oh no, I've already got my head down now and I know where I'm going, which is to the rim, and then you eventually don't make it there because Donovan Clingan's in your way, or because Tamani Kamara is like, I know exactly where you're going, and I'm just going to snatch it from you and run away with it the other way. So just being like a bit more aware of that tonight would be good from Benedict Matherin's point of view, because then they're the sort of things that I think just translate well into playoff basketball as well. And Jordan Miller can kind of find a way to get his own around that. I think Jordan Miller is generally a bit better at that kind of like dump off strategy, where it doesn't feel like he dies at the rim quite as much as Benedict Mathurin does. It feels a bit more like he's got like hands around the rim to be able to just like, as I say, like dump it off to guys who are in the dunker spots. I keep there's a pass the Clippers keep doing, which has actually been like weirdly either Derek Jones Jr. or John Collins like doing it to each other, I think. But they kind of like cut along the baseline and then doing like I don't know how to describe it, but it's almost like for fans of cricket, it's a bit like a reverse sweep where they kind of go like that underneath and pass the ball, and then someone comes in and eventually like finishes it with a dunk or whatever. Things like that would be good to like find another angle of doing that. The angles that Miller and Mathurin will run in from, or like going around a back screen, for example, and then being able to do that to whoever the roller is. I just feel like there's so many ways this can work. We've just kind of run out of time for it to make it work, and it's part of like the tricky thing about being coach, like having coach Ty Lue, for one, because he is tinkering Ty, but also having a roster that is like does kind of like need all these moving parts and needs things moving around. Is that you kind of have to test it as much as you can until suddenly you can't, and it's time to like throw it in the deep end. Tonight is very much the deep end. This is effectively playoff basketball. I know like people are saying they're playing as something different, but the Clippers should now be treating, especially these next two games, as the start
Yeah.
of the postseason, really, at the very least, even if you don't want to call it the playoffs. So
Yeah.
yeah, feeling good about it. Like I still really high on Benedict Mathurin. I think there's a few people who are kind of already trying to check out early from the Benedict Mathurin experience, because of being like, oh, I saw what like was so frustrating about Indiana. But like again, just to sort of remind people, like Indiana weren't completely out on Benedict Mathurin. They were just not really sure. And then like this opportunity of getting Zubac presented itself to them. I'm still not sure, but I'm pretty high on him, and I'm sure the Clippers still will be, and I'm sure he'll still get paid a relatively decent sum in the off season. There's just a few things for the Clippers still to work out, but that bench unit has just become like a really fascinating proposition now, and it kind of lends itself a bit better to the starting lineup, I think, which me and you I think I said a couple of episodes ago. It's really important getting Chris Dunn out there, and I think you've seen on the court, but also heard from people like Darius Garland as well, just how important it is to have Chris Dunn out there.
Yeah, Chris Dunn has been absolutely fantastic all season. I've seen over the last couple of days, obviously the campaign to get him in one of the sort of all defensive teams is really starting to kick off. I don't actually know when that will be announced, but I think he deserves a listing. So much. He's just been absolutely fantastic, and I think just balances out this roster perfectly. Complements Darius Garland really well. I think it was a shame we actually didn't see them or Chris Dunn partnering Darius Garland last night. against the Thunder, which I think I can understand it. I think the Clippers kind of knew that they might not win that game, and with trying to manage Garland and his injury, I could understand it. But obviously, Garland's mentioned it a few times around like how impressed he's been with Chris Dunn, and his tenacity on the defensive end just keeps some of that like defensive identity that Clippers had last year. So shout out to Chris Dunn, and yeah, really hope we see more from guys like Benedict Mathurin, like you've mentioned, and start to understand his matchups a bit more, and I think sort of take that next step in his career. It needs to be really aggressive against the Trailblazers tonight, and just not let up. I know obviously he hasn't found that success as of late, but I know he'll continue to have the confidence of the group. So I just really hope that he starts to find his groove, because I think, as you mentioned, like we are in pretty much in the postseason now. Like this is where we need guys to step up, and I'm not going to sit here and write off Benedict Mathurin. I think, if it was the other way around and he started really slow and then started having those performances we saw at the start, like nobody would be saying anything about him right now. It's just that obviously he started so hot with the Clippers, and just has sort of that has really like tailed off significantly over like the past couple weeks. It's such a short period of time in the NBA, and I believe in his ability to turn this around. And it can start tonight if he really starts to put some numbers up. How he did for the Pacers last year, and like let's not forget how important he was, particularly when Tyrese Halliburton went down in the finals, no less, against the best team in the league, in the Thunder. So he's definitely got it in him, and this is a guy who's stepped up in the playoffs, and hopefully will do it in these high pressurized games that the Clippers have got coming up against not only the Trailblazers, but if they do end up losing that game, they're going to want to put a good show in against the Warriors, because that's obviously going to end up being their playing matchup. So yeah, fascinated to see what does develop with Mathurin. I loved your points about Jordan Miller as well, and I think he's worth a shout out, because I know I had been mentioning around how I felt like it was sort of it felt like a choice between Jordan Miller and Kobe Sanders. It felt like Kobe Sanders wasn't getting his flowers, but I think at this point, like I can really see the benefit of having Jordan Miller in these lineups, particularly from like that playmaking angle. I loved one of his passes last night against the Thunder. I think it was a sort of an over the top pass to Kobe Sanders, who was cutting in for a dunk. Like he just has it all in his locker, and I've been tremendously impressed with him. And I think we're going to need that kind of ball movement that he's displayed, that he has in his game, but also his aggression to get to the line. I don't think his 3-point shot has been great, sort of this latter part of the season, in terms of the three ball, but I've been pretty impressed with him as of recently. I was impressed with him last night. And yeah, Jordan Miller definitely needs to be one of those guys to help the bench unit in terms of continuing to provide that production, because he's going to be, I think, one of the leading guys, obviously, to play with Benedict Mathurin, Kobe Sanders, even. So Jordan Miller, one to watch tonight for me, but also John Collins, and like you were mentioning around his impact, the impact that he'll have on the bench unit. I completely agree. I think it's the right move, particularly for his rebounding. I love how Kawhi and everyone knows that this is the problem, because after the last game against the Portland Trail Blazers, like it's impossible to miss it. Like it was just such an insane difference of performance between the two sides in terms of rebounding. Just to sort of remind everyone, on the last time the Clippers played the Portland Trailblazers, Trailblazers had 18 offensive rebounds to the Clippers 8, which is just unforgivable, really. The Blazers are definitely a better rebounding team than the Clippers, but they're going to need to fight for every ball, every missed shot, absolutely everything, because the Blazers are one of the better rebounding teams in the league. And I think what I've liked about John Collins' game is that obviously he is a guy who can go and grab those boards. He can go even on the other side, like if the Blazers do start to really start racking up those defensive rebounds, this is a guy who could sort of go back the other end and show that he can go get them as well. I think he had 5 offensive rebounds even last night against the Thunder, who I think in some ways profile fairly similar to Trailblazers in terms of being a young team with length, with athletic players who do just go and get rebounds. I think the Thunder on the night had 38 rebounds in total. So to have someone like that who's really, other than maybe Derek Jones Jr., probably one of the only like premier rebounders on the team, I think he does need to come in and like shore up that bench unit because if we start to sort of really think about this Portland game, like that's what I think it's going to come down to. It was the difference, as I said, between the two sides last time, but also just second chance points in general, and that goes outside the idea of being a better rebounding team. That was also turnovers as well. Like the Blazers this season have been the team that recorded the most turnovers per game, 17 turnovers. I think they'd hit that last time out against the Clippers. They'd had 17 turnovers. Clippers had 14. But the difference, again, was that the Blazers made more out of the Clippers turnovers than the Clippers did from the Blazers. The Blazers had 21 points of the Clippers' 14 turnovers. The Clippers only had 20 from 17. So again, it's about really trying to maximize those second chance points because the Blazers showed us at home what their game is to the maximum level in terms of their fight, their intensity, their aggression, and I think like you mentioned, this is going to be a game less about those X's and O's, and in a way, like Ty Lue's sort of famous X's and O's might just be putting the right guys on the floor who are going to fight and going to be intense and are going to match up well with the Blazers, and I think navigating tough moments because I think about, and I think you said this at the start of the podcast, I think about these like big games that the Clippers have had historically, and I think when there is this sort of matchup deficit, which I do think there is against the Portland Trail Blazers, in terms of their athleticism, I do start to worry. I feel like I've seen these kind of games before, and I really want the Clippers to overcome it and show me something that maybe I haven't seen so often when they do play sides like the Trailblazers, who have, if we're honest, I think they embarrassed them in that game. And going up to the Northwest, where it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Josh, but I think it's going to be like almost like a playoff game. Like it's going to feel like a playoff game because it's going to mean that much. It's going to be a whole lot to the Blazers, it's going to mean a whole lot to their fans. There's no other team in that area of the country, so they're going to, everyone in the Northwest of America is going to want to go to that game and support the Blazers because this is a young team that they can get behind who've done pretty well this year. I think they've gone and surpassed everyone's expectations. What are you thinking about this game tonight, Josh? Because yeah, I'm definitely nervous for it. I think we've seen different things throughout this week that are either going to be a bit of a weakness for the Clippers, or as we mentioned, guys like John Collins, Jordan Miller, potentially, and Kobe Sanders as well could come to the aid. Obviously, Kawhi Leonard, we know is going to come. He's going to give us 20 plus points as he has been. He's going to go for that record, which he's still on track for. But like, yeah, definitely want to get your thoughts on how are you feeling about this game tonight, and how do you think the Clippers are going to get on? What are the things that they need to worry about, and what are some areas that you think that they might do well in?
Yeah, it's huge for so many reasons, really, and I think like kind of least of them is about like playoff seeding. More of it for me is like I guess like the potential of being able to get to the playoffs in the first place. Like the Clippers have been in scenarios in the past where like they've tend to take like the hardest route into things, but then in taking the hardest route, they fail along that route as well. Think about like times when the team has been accused of tanking to get an easier seed in the playoffs and still gone out in the first round and all those kinds of things. Like it would be a very Clippers thing to do to lose to Portland, and like I'm not saying that as if it will happen, but it'd be very Clippers thing to do to lose to Portland, to get in the 9-10 with the Warriors, and then for Steph Curry to just turn up in one game and have an absolute like virtuoso performance and take the
Yeah.
Clippers out of the play. And we want the Clippers to be in the 7-8 we want the Clippers to be able to have two bites of the apple at the very least at this. Like if they are to be bested by Phoenix in that 7-8 matchup, then to, be able to have one more chance to stay in it. So it's just like, to me, it's of crucial importance that you're not just giving yourself like a one-off chance to get into the playoffs. I've kind of said throughout that, I'd wanted the OKC Thunder matchup more than the Spurs matchup. I talked a little bit on the last episode about the Spurs kind of like still having like small guards. The trouble is, like, basically I was only really referring to the Aaron Fox because all the rest of the guys are still like 6'4", 6'5", which I know feels like a small guard these days because we've
Yeah,
got guards that are like 6'7", 6'8", 6'9". So like 6'5" is definitely not a small guard. De'Aaron Fox is like a smaller guard, but there's so much speed in that backcourt for the Spurs. So much like youth and athleticism. That's kind of where I was like worried. Whereas it feels like the Thunder have, I don't know, just got like more of a variable in them. And listen, the variable margin with either team is the slimmest it could possibly be. Like, to me, we're talking about the two best teams in the NBA, and it's
yeah,
Boston third, and really behind Boston, I'm not sure anybody is that close. Like, I think everybody is another like 2 tiers below that. So, yeah, like whichever team we get is going to be a really difficult matchup in the playoffs. It's just about kind of giving yourself that best opportunity. Like, if we win tonight and get the 8 seed and then win against Phoenix, like, bring on the San Antonio Spurs. Let's see. Let's hope that that lack of playoff experience and stuff that they've got is something that the Clippers can, buy into, and whether they can find a way to stop Wemby. I mean, like, I don't know how anybody finds a way to stop Wemby. And I don't know how the Clippers do with, basically a backup center playing the starting center and then no backup center, assuming that Isaiah Jackson, I'm not hearing any positive signs about when he's going to come back now necessarily. So it's just going to be really tricky either way. But, if the Clippers get into the 7-8 and then find a way to still win out in the second game, if they lost to Phoenix, then I would personally love all the storylines of like the OKC Thunder. I know some people are kind of wanting to like the Clippers to shy away from them. Like, I just think bring it on. Like, the Clippers, to
yeah,
me, like, and I've said this over and over again on podcasts and things in the past, like, the Clippers are best to me when they are underdogs. And for me, they've always been like the underdog of LA, and that's what I always quite liked about them. Like, the Lakers to me
yeah,
always felt like Hollywood, and the Clippers felt like the working class of LA. And I want them to like always embrace that underdog spirit, always embrace being written off. Like, they're going to be written off in the 7-8 matchup. They're going to be written off probably because people will say Steph's better than Kawhi if they fall into the 9-10 as well. Like, they're going to be written
yeah,
off in so many different ways throughout this next few weeks. There's probably even people writing them off tonight against the Portland Trailblazers. And I'm kind of not here to entertain that, because all I would say to the people who say that is, in fact, I wouldn't even say anything to those people. I'd just be like, you wait and see. And I would turn that then to the guys in the locker room. And where I said before about Kawhi kind of playing down the occasion, like, I'm all for him doing that as long as he's kind of saying to him, like, also, people don't think you're capable of doing this, but like, I know you are. And there's so many guys on this roster who I think can still embody that underdog spirit. Darius Garland, like, I know Cleveland fans love him, but people always talked about his defense and talked about the things that he couldn't do rather than things that he could do. Benedict Mathurin, people were saying Indiana shouldn't pay him. Some people are still saying the Clippers shouldn't pay him. You can
yeah,
go through the roster. Chris Dunn was in the G League for a bit. Derek Jones Jr. I mean, I don't know if he was necessarily like bombed out of Dallas, or if he wanted to make the move out of Dallas. Brooke Lopez being written off because of his age. John Collins getting paid a lot of money and then being written off as well. There's so many stories. Jordan Miller being like a 26-year-old, pretty inexperienced NBA player. So many stories up and down this roster of guys being written off. Kawhi was meant to be finished because of all these injuries. I could keep going on forever. The Clippers are going to be written off at every term, and they're always going to every turn, and they're always going to be underdogs. But to me, that's where they absolutely excel, like backs against the wall. That's where I back the Clippers the most.
clip that up, show that to them in the locker room tonight. They need to know where they've come from. And you're completely right. The Clippers do and have always embodied that underdog spirit, and even going in tonight, considering the performance they had against the Blazers last time, going on the road, as I said, probably going to be a bit of like a playoff atmosphere. It's going to be intense. It's going to be physical. Both teams really want this to define their season and obviously give them the boost going into the postseason with the chance to make the playoffs. And yeah, I think the Clippers need to individually, like you said, there are stories in there. They need to remember where they've come from, the hardships they've faced through not only their careers, but like let's remember this season, how much they've had to fight back from the embarrassment that was the start of this year and being 6-21 and having the Thunder sort of looking down on the team and potentially having a lottery pick this year and all the questions that were thrown at the players in the post game interviews. How difficult must that have been to lose 21 out of 27 games, continuously have to go to the locker room and describe what is going on in this team and having that sort of outside noise, that pressure, but to have I guess the knack to turn that around. They're obviously just got to this point this season now where it's just all on this game and just showing up for one because just winning this, it doesn't really matter what happens in that Warriors game if you end up taking this one. So let's go out there. Let's get this win. I definitely need to see a lot more from this team than we did last time. I think, fortunately, the Clippers, I think we forget because we are just focusing on that one performance at Intuit Dome a few weeks ago. The Clippers have beaten this Portland Trail Blazers team, and they have a pretty good record historically against the Portland Trail Blazers. Obviously, in terms of this group has obviously faced the Trail Blazers, and didn't look great, but they have an opportunity to turn that around. And yep, I believe that they're going to do it, Josh. I feel like they're going to come away with this one with a win. I think it's going to be big games from Kawhi and Darius Garland because that's what they need to get this win, in my opinion. I think both of them need to really put the production in. I think the Portland Trailblazers is definitely not going to make it easy for the Clippers. The Clippers can adjust. They can be more intense. They can grab rebounds, but the Portland Trailblazers, I feel like they're going to do the same. Like let's not write them off. This is not going to be an easy one. I still believe guys like Drew Holiday are going to be a bit of a nightmare for the Clippers. They were a nightmare last time. I think a lot of people were surprised at that Drew Holiday performance. I think I was, but I think assessing beyond that, like that wasn't like an outrageous game for Drew Holiday. I think he almost mirrored his 3-point shooting performance in the next game after that Clippers performance. So the Portland Trailblazers aren't going to make this easy. The Clippers just really have to lock in to this one, and allow it to summarize their season because they've worked so hard to get to this point to be able to pretty much finish the season over 500, which was the goal that was set out by Ty Lue. If we sort of think back to that 6-21 start, they've come such a long way, and I don't want to throw it all on one performance, but I think the team deserve to go out there and show the NBA, show the fans what it means to be an LA Clipper. And yeah, Josh, let's get this clipped up. Let's get it in front of the Clippers team before tonight because I think they do need to be reminded. I'm sure they know what this means. They know what it means to the fans. They know what it means to themselves. And I'm sure Kawhi, who I think we all thought was a bit of a silent leader, will be one of the main guys in the locker room tonight, sort of reminding everyone what it's going to mean. And they obviously don't need us to say that, but I think you summarized that perfectly.
Yeah, and I know we were trying to do like complicated rocket science maths before this, James. Basically, the Blazers would get in over the Clippers if they won tonight because of their conference record. So there's
Yeah.
only one clear outcome tonight, which is LA Clippers win, secure that eighth seed, and let's worry about the rest later.
Yeah, and next time we record, Josh, we'll know who we're playing. I don't suppose when the next or when the sort of the playing game would be. Would it be before we potentially record again? Because that would be interesting and potentially is going to settle when we're going to record. Because obviously we know the Clippers are going to be in the playing. We'll find out tonight where that's going to be and who that's going to be against, which I think is tremendously exciting. Either way, obviously, it would be a disappointment if the Clippers do lose, but obviously, if a playing game against the Golden State Warriors is going to be tremendously fun as well, albeit very, very scary. I'm obviously just banking the Clippers are going to win tonight. I also agree with you. I think they're going to do it, but keen to find out when is that game going to be because it must be a quick turnaround, right? Because the playoffs is only just around the corner.
Yeah, so that if we did get into the eighth seed, which obviously we're both presuming that we're going to, then the first game in Phoenix would be on the Tuesday evening, so the Wednesday morning for us. So assuming that we like record beyond that Wednesday, like our sort of more normal time for us, the Clippers will have at least played against the Phoenix Suns. So we could be sat here in the playoffs. We could be sat here maybe with another playing game to go. That game would then be on the Friday night, the second playing game.
True.
So we'll probably end up recording at some point in between that first playing game and the second playing game. But I think we've kind of said all we need to say at this stage now, don't we? Like if the Clippers don't win tonight, then we can be, existential about what comes in the future between that time of when we next record. But I'm backing the Clippers to win tonight to get into that game against Phoenix, and then hopefully we're sat here this time next week as people as a team in the playoffs. That would be nice.
It's exciting, yeah. I mean, like we generally don't know what we're previewing next week. That's pretty fun in itself. We might be sat here, as you said, previewing the first round of the playoffs. Which, if you go back a few pods, Josh, that was what you've been saying all along. The Clippers get into the first round, or we're sat here sort of nervously predicting a second round playing game, which I'm trying to think back and how many times Clippers been in the play-in. I mean, the only sort of real play-in memories I have of the Clippers is the Pelicans play-in where Paul George
Yeah.
the night before gets sort of COVID protocol, which is just obviously typical Clippers luck. And I'm finding any kind of wood to touch now that we don't get any kind of things like that come out because that has obviously been so Clippers where it does actually come down to these high pressured games and then just something out of the Clippers' control will just go wrong. As of right now, everyone is due to play tonight, I believe. I don't think we have any significant injuries, which is great. I believe the Portland Trailblazers may have a few guys back. I think Sharp might be. Well, he was listed as questionable. I think Krejci as well, questionable whether they'll play. I don't know how long either of them have been out for, but obviously Shaedon Sharp would be a big player to come back for the Clippers. I actually don't believe Shaedon Sharp played against the Clippers last time when the Clippers did drop that game, so it could be a little X factor that we've got to look out for tonight. But man, I'm very excited for it, Josh. I feel like just speaking it all through with you today, although there are things that I'm worried about, I'm starting to feel more excited about this game tonight because it just has that like big game feeling, and I think either way, I think the Clippers are going to be fine. I think we're going to be sat here next week in a great position, either in the playoffs already. Or I think with a sort of favourable second round game in the play-in, but yeah, this is it. This is the money end of the season, Josh, and this is what it's all been coming up to. 80 games played, just two left, and then potentially many more for the Clippers. Although, like we've been saying, that first round matchup is going to be very, very difficult. Any final thoughts, Josh, before we wrap this one up?
No, just to confirm what you, I'm sure, will go on to say at the end that we are all we're all praying for the Clippers to come through this one tonight and to run through the tape. And I don't know if you want to try and do the end in unison, James, as like a war cry to the to the Clippers players for tonight.
Let's do it, Josh. Let's do it because like this is the moment. This is the big point of the season. As you said, it's all come down to this. Ready when you are, Josh.
Three, two, one, go, Clips,
Go,
go.
Clips, go.